All right, so welcome back to the Cognition School Podcast. Today we have a very, very special guest. He's a personal friend of mine from, man, long, long time ago since my high school days. And we're so honored and I'm glad to have my good friend Andrew Taylor here. And so welcome to the Cognition School Podcast, Andrew.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm honored to be here, and I'm glad to be a part of this situation.
Yeah, so some interesting things that just from a background point of view, we crossed paths at Martin Grove back in 1993,
Yeah,
maybe. So yeah, we've known each other for, my gosh, is
a
that is
long
that
time.
30 something years?
It's
So
life brings you to certain situations. Basketball has been my cup of tea. I've done it since middle school through high school. Had an opportunity to play in the United States, got a scholarship, and played, and became a coach in Florida, and was very successful. Fortunate to have an opportunity to work with a lot of great athletes who went on to be pros, and just it's in the bloodline. Basketball's what I love. I like hockey, but I love basketball.
yeah, no, the some interesting facts that I kind of looked when I looked you up. I mean, this is incredible. 234 to 42 record and a Florida State championship as a high school coach. So how do you even play that many games?
Well, in Florida, you can play as many as you want if you're good enough. And I'll tell you, it's interesting. The dynamic in Florida is sports is everything, and people live it. And although Florida is supposed to be a football state, it's very much a basketball state. You just won another national championship. So they've won three. It's basketball it's a pipeline. I've seen it here in Canada now. People have the Raptors won, and so there's a fever. But basketball has been, it's been a foundation in Florida for a long time. And I was very fortunate enough to get a scholarship, play there, and become a high school coach and run a program that was nationally ranked.
Yeah, and what's kind of like the secret to a record like that, where you have 234 wins?
Well, I think the losses matter more because at the end of the
That's true.
day, what happens is people get comfortable, and what I've learned in my lifetime with basketball is if you learn from the losses, it's going to make you a better coach. And one of those things that athletes really need to start understanding is, you know, what did I do to help or what did I do to hurt? Because if you don't take accountability, you're never going to get better. People talk about the me. I always talk about the me and the we. Me meaning I do what I need to do so that we can be better as a team. The way it is now, kids don't want to look at it that way. That lens is tainted.
Mm-hmm. I think especially now with Instagram or TikTok, you just have highlights, right? And it doesn't necessarily teach them anything. It just shows them, what some of these guys do, but it doesn't teach them how did they get there or what did it take to get there. So I would think that, as a coach, it's hard today in today's game where you're dealing with that, right? That where the coaching is done on a mobile device as opposed to like X's and O's and on a whiteboard.
Well, yeah, and with analytics and parents, you don't want to blame the parents, but parents need to be parents and kids need to be kids. One of the things that I often used to say to my parents, which a lot of people don't like this, but I'd make my parents sign an agreement. We basically went through a list of things that we're going to do. And if you don't like it, you probably should take your child someplace else. And it's not because I'm trying to control the situation, but you want me to coach, I'm going to coach. And I want your kid to be as best as your kid could be. And sometimes parents look through tainted eyes. And all they see is Johnny. They don't see everybody else. And at the end of the day, in sports, especially, you got to get this camaraderie. You got to have this bond, and everyone has to do their part. And if there's not clear lines, you have blurry lines, and blurry lines become very messy.
Yeah, and I distinctly remember watching you play at Martin Grove, and And that, I mean, the team that was put together the year that I was there was stacked, right? Like I think at that time you guys just came from winning Oscars the year before that, and I mean every individual player, you had George and yourself and all these guys that were, really, I mean, if thing in a perfect world, like, yeah, I would have expected everybody to, kind of make their pass to the NBA. But at the same time, I knew that as a team, like you guys played extremely well together. And it was like watching like a pro game. I remember watching you guys just kind of move the ball like crazy.
Yeah, it was funny. Bless his soul, Dave West, our high school coach. One of the things we thought about with our team, anyone could have scored 30, 40 points, but we weren't interested in that. We were about trying to get to OFSA and playing as a team. And I think oftentimes now, the individuality, people don't understand the value of teams, and I'm going to segue a minute, like with hockey. I'm looking at the Panthers and the guy they got from Boston. That's for me, that's like, that's what you do. You bring someone in who's going to come in and help. And, he really helped. Anyway, back back to the basketball point. But yeah, we were very lucky that we understood that it was a team game and that we were going to share the basketball and you're going to make the extra pass. And I think that's one of the things as we talk about hockey and relating to basketball is, if you don't understand that it's a team game and you don't use your vision and make good decisions, you really get hurt. Again, from a hockey player, you have a turnover in the wrong zone. Next thing you know, it's a breakaway, it's the game.
Hmm.
And with basketball, it's the same concept that you basically have to be aware of your situation all the time. Almost you have to have eyes in the back of your head because a good basketball player does what a hockey player does, it scans.
Yeah, I definitely find that with basketball, because obviously the court is smaller than the rink, that everything is within, kind of within view, right? That
Yeah.
when we watch it on TV, that it's very rare that a player is not in the frame, where hockey is, you kind of focus on one area. You may see three or four guys kind of in a scrum or whatever, but there's other guys kind of floating around. And so that makes it a little bit kind of curious because you don't know exactly where those guys are. And all of a sudden they pop into the frame and then they're able to score their goal or make a play. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing this weekend, so I have a presentation that I'm delivering for a bunch of coaches. Specifically, I'm talking about off puck movement. And obviously, I borrow a lot of the concepts from basketball because I think they're very similar. It's 5 on 5. You still have kind of set plays. You have a whole bunch of different similarities with respect to hockey. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion with you today, just in terms of, from a decision making perspective, like you mentioned, what are some things that, are key things that basketball players need to kind of learn in order to make better decisions for their game?
I think a lot of times with basketball, you have with this, there seems to be this urgency about wanting to go fast, and it's not about being fast; it's about being methodical. And I think for a basketball player to be successful, they have to understand when to go and how to go, because there's this element of lackadaisical. I don't know. You have to be decisive at certain points, but you also have to follow the rules. Saying, for example, in transition, you're a guard and you have a basketball, your center's gone down the floor and he's open. So instead of you dribbling the ball all the way up there to pass it to him, you throw him the long pass and have the confidence that he can catch that ball and make the layup. And it's one of those things where from a basketball perspective, you have to always ask yourself, what is the best choice I'm about to make? Because a lot of times now people do what I call the, no disrespect, the James Harden. People want to just what they used to say, dribble, 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 dribble. Well, the other four players are standing there watching you dribble, 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 dribble. Like you say with hockey, you move the puck. Basketball, same thing. You have to move the basketball and pass the ball to the open person, because at the end of the day, you want that person to get the best shot available, not the shot that you want. The best shot available means that sometimes you have to pass that ball to someone else who's wide open.
And obviously hockey is the same as well. But when we say staying open, that doesn't mean just kind of staying at one spot and just, tapping your stick and saying, "Hey, give me the pass." It's you still have to be in motion
It's
constantly.
absolutely. It's, I look at Steph Curry. He is the epitome. At 6 feet, he doesn't stop. And people don't understand. People who guard him, they're exhausted by halftime because they realize that his conditioning is peak and he does not stop. But then when it gets to the fourth quarter, he's fresh and he's ready to go. And people just don't understand like the movement that he has to do just to get open is ridiculous. Not to mention the fact that he makes these ridiculous 27, 28-foot shots. But it's one of those things where the movement is so important because you can't be stagnant in basketball. It doesn't work. And the same with hockey. You just can't be stagnant.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of kids in today's game and that play minor hockey that are too robotic, right? So the coach said, "Okay, stay here," and that's all they do. They don't move. They're like, "Okay, coach told me to be here, so that's why I'm here." And I think that's kind of, it's a missed opportunity because that coach could probably say, "Hey, if you keep moving around, at the end, this is where you want to end up." But it doesn't mean you just stand there. And I see it all the time when team does a set power play, where you have a bumper in the middle and you got two guys on the flank, one guy's in front of the net, one guy's at the point, and all they do is just stand there and they just pass, 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 pass. Nothing happens. The other team's just kind of standing there going, "Okay, guys, do something here." Right? I think that's truly an opportunity that's missed by coaches to get them to be a little bit more creative and say, "Okay, this is where you want to end up at the very end before you take a shot," right? But what are the steps that have to go there? Like obviously at the NHL level, they're switching all the time, right? They're trying to throw the other guy off, and I think that's the same for basketball. If you're on the offensive side, you're rotating all the time. You're screening guys. Obviously, screening is not allowed in hockey, but something close to that where, yeah, you're kind of in the way of a potential defender, and at the same time you're trying to move the ball around. You're trying to get the other team out of position, and that's how you score. And I think those similarities, I always love to watch basketball games now because I see it almost looks like a power play where there's no speed involved because you're just in the offensive zone. But what other things could they be doing? And I think that's something that I'd love to kind of get more insights on. With respect to like the cognitive skills of a basketball player, what is that player? I mean, what's your ideal player for having smart basketball IQ?
For me, basketball IQ is basically you are you're looking for the next play. You're what I would call the Magic Johnson mind. You have to look three plays ahead before the play comes. Because like you said, the game's in motion. And so as a basketball player, you have to know that your team has certain sets that they're going to run through, and you have to ask yourself, what is the most efficient way to run that set to get the most productive shot? And so, from a cognitive perspective, you want to be that guard who kind of sees the future. So, like you said, for a hockey perspective, for me, when I'm watching hockey and I see guys with the stick just playing with the puck and they're not moving the puck, it drives me crazy because, again, from a basketball perspective, it's just like someone just dribbling. You have to move the puck. And that person, like you said, the end goal is to get the goal, to get the shot, but you have to be in a situation where it flows. And if you're cognitive, you're starting to look, you're saying, okay, if A goes B, we're going to go to C. And if C is not there, we're going to go D. And if D is not there, we're going to go to E. And as a good basketball player, you have to go from A to E just like that. And that's what the cognitive comes in. Like I said, I'm so excited to be working with you because I understand the value of the brain and basketball players right now, in my perspective, I think that if they were to work on their brain, a lot of good players would be great players because it's okay to be athletic. It's okay to jump. It's okay to be fast. But if you don't have the cognitive development and your brain is firing at a different level, everything else just slows down and the game becomes smooth. Like for me, I was pretty athletic, but my favorite basketball player is Magic Johnson because here's a guy who was a point guard at 6'9", who ended up being a center. He did it all, Hall of Famer. But again, the way I played basketball was like Magic Johnson because I wanted to have my mind open to everything, looking for my teammates. Because from a basketball perspective, again, I'd have to say to myself, okay, I'm A, but let's get all the way to E. So if we get to B or C, great. We're going to get the layup, the dunk, the pass. But when I start, I'm looking from A all the way to E. And that I think is,
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting you say that because so when I used to play, I once had a coach that told me that I think too far ahead. That so I remember him telling me he's like Satoshi, like you gotta take it one play at a time, right? But I'm like, yeah, but I want this guy over here. Like I know he's gonna be here, right?
yeah.
And so, but obviously it didn't work out that way because the other teammates weren't necessarily kind of thinking the same way that I was thinking, right? Because I thought they were going to be there. They ended up going the other way. But, yeah, and the other thing I wanted to maybe ask you is um, overload, meaning like decision fatigue and thinking too much, right? Is there such a thing? If so, how do you recommend people to get over that? So is it, in other words, you're going from A to E, so you got all these other pieces that you have as options, but there's potentially either fatigue or confusion or whatever you want to call it that slows them down because they're thinking too much. How do you define that balance?
Well, the way I believe in to control that type of situation for me has always been to take a breath. And I think in basketball, in every sport, I think you have to take a breath. And as you're processing from A to E, or you're going A to B, A to C, you have to say to yourself, okay, if things are going a little too chaotic, I need to reset myself. Because if you don't reset yourself, then you're totally lost, right? And as an athlete, as a coach, as a player, you have to be able to be grounded, because if you can't get your mind in a place where you're overloaded, then you're not going to be useful to your team. So often I tell people to take a breath and really step back. And it's not a long breath, but it's enough for you to say to yourself, it's okay. For example, from a hockey perspective, you just lost the puck and now they're going and they got a good shot because of my overload, right? So the next possession, I got to say to myself, you know what? I'm going A to E, but make sure I scan properly and not get too excited. And oftentimes, if you could take that moment to take a breath, I think guys really start to understand that they're capable of making great decisions once they start to center themselves.
Yeah, no, those are absolutely important points in terms of kind of the reset. I mean, we teach that here all the time. Like where when guys make mistakes here, they kind of beat themselves up. But in the meantime, the game still goes on. The drill is still going. I'm still going. I'm not going to stop for them just because they made a mistake here or there. Uh, and that's a representation of the actual game itself. So I think that's really key. In terms of kind of, you mentioned a little bit about scanning. Like how do you guys approach scanning from a basketball perspective, like relative to just some of the things that we're working with here?
So, from a basketball perspective, you have your court, right? And so you want to make sure as a basketball player that you can see all of this, all of this. So, if it's not in your sight line, then you're not in the right position. From a basketball perspective, you have to have the vision that you see everything in front of you because of the moving pieces, whether it be the plays, whether it be the defenses, the offenses. You have to have open sight, which means, like I said, scanning is probably the right term, but you just have to be you have to be visually aware all the time in basketball. Because unlike hockey, where you said there might be things going on behind you, you have to be in front. Because if you're not in front, then they're going the other way for a layup or a dunk.
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely see that as well, and especially with some of the advanced kind of plays that are happening, where you have like if you have the ball and you've got two, if not three defenders kind of coming at you, and we talked about this a long time ago, where you have two guys covering one guy, right? Or that there's confusion happening in the offensive zone, that their defenders are now confused, out of position. There's a switch that happens, and all of a sudden, two guys are now covering one guy, and that leaves somebody else open, right?
Yeah, that it happens a lot now because what happens is guys like to jump. Like for an example here, this is just a little. I hope I'm doing it right here. So it's a pick and roll situation here. This guy sets the pick, and this gentleman here is trying to go here, going down. This person will usually pop out here, which allows that shot, this shot here. But this person who made the pass ends up being wide open because two take one, right? So it's all about, I apologize, it's all about the advantage versus the disadvantage. So when two take one, someone's wide open.
Yeah,
And
I mean
that's,
that happens in hockey all the time, right? Like especially when the puck goes behind the net, all of a sudden everything starts to collapse because at that point everybody is watching that puck carrier, and and all of a sudden who covers who, right? Which
yeah,
defenseman covers that guy that went behind the net? And
yeah,
do you stay in front of the net and just wait for the guy to make a move, or do you start pressuring him, to force him to do something, but then that puts you out of position. Potentially the other defenseman might also kind of start to, go after that defenseman as well. So now like you're the whole thing about two covering one, it applies as well.
yeah. It's, I'm going to show you a little bit of a diagram here. Like I'm trying to simplify this a little bit. So as a point guard in basketball, point guard, as far as scanning concerned, he needs to be able to see all five of these spots. He needs to see where the ball is going to be there. But the secondary thing to that is here's the guard on this side. Well, this guard here has to be able to see. I apologize. Just trying to clean it up for you because it's a board. So you have your point guard here. You have your guard here, your guard here, your forward here, your forward here. So in my explanation, Am I? Can you see this, Toshi?
Yep.
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 Okay. So this person has to see 5 points of reference. This person, in my perspective, I think they have to see four perspectives here. And on the opposite end, from a forward perspective, you only need to really worry about this triangulation right here. And so when you're starting to move the basketball and you're talking about scanning, these people have to be able to see those spots. I'm a forward. I have to make sure that I know all of this. I'm a guard on the wing. I should know all of this. If I'm a guard here, vice versa. But as a point guard, you got to scan it all. You have to know it all. And so that's so important as far as movement and making decisions because once you have that set up, then you start to get a flow and you start understanding who's your weakest link.
Right. Right. Yeah. And with what you're describing there, I mean, in basketball, there's all these, there's different terminologies, but they kind of describe the same thing, which is when do you start to drive the net, right? Based on where the ball is and where all your defenders are. Uh, maybe give us a couple examples of things that you would work with to kind of identify certain scenarios where it's like two covering one. You have your guard that starts to maybe drive to the net, or obviously there's like also different terminologies like 45 cuts and stuff like that. But for the folks that maybe not aren't familiar with basketball terminology, maybe if you could describe a couple that you would teach.
One of the things we talk about is when to pass the ball. So you're talking about attacking in a fast break, 3-on-2, one such situation. So here you would have, I'm going to turn this way, maybe this will make sense. So you have a point guard here, you have a guard here, a guard here. Oh, I got to put it the other way, sorry. Point guards here, guards here, guards here. Here are defenders. So this is in transition. So the point guard has to make a decision here. The guards should be attacking the basket, and the guard here has to make a decision when he gets to what I call the elbow. Once the guard here, here's the pass, because the pass comes here, and here's attacking the basket. The defender has to make a decision. If the defender takes the player here, this defender has to come back to protect. Once that happens, this person here should be wide open. And that means that's where the layup would come from, right? So from a from a perspective, 3-on-2, 2-on-1 is all about the numbers because two people can't guard one. So at the end of the day, you have a 2-on-1 situation, which is what this is what basketball breaks down to me. You have two people and one person is trying to defend. You have to give the ball to the open person. So I guess in layman's say 2-on-1 is here we are, and this is the one. Here's the defender. So if I have the ball, I have to make a decision. I'm either going to the basket to score. If the defender stops me, I have to pass the ball to my teammate because that person's wide open. Now, whether or not that teammate is the best, you have to give him that shot because that shot is a wide open shot. And a wide open shot is better than a defended shot. And I think that's one of the things that I guess in hockey, the same thing, guys, they keep the puck too long and they don't give the ball, they don't pass, make the pass where they need to make the pass because the guy feels like he has a better angle. But if the guy's on the other side of the net and he's wide open, that's just be a bang bang shot. And again, I'm not trying to bash our Leafs, but I'm watching hockey, and again, this is just from my perspective. I think sometimes people hold the puck too long, as with us with basketball. Guys hold the basketball too much, and you look at the playoffs here right now. You got four teams left in the NBA. You have Oklahoma, which should be the favorite. They have our Canadian Shea Alexander, and you know they're a team that he's their best player, but he always says give the ball to the open player, and essentially, I think they have a chance to win the whole thing. Because at the end of the
Yeah,
day, you may make the extra pass. I just I'm watching hockey, and again, I'm watching the Panthers, and in that 5 minute second in the second period, these guys just they revved it up, but they made the extra pass, and boom, boom, boom. So you know,
yeah, no, I think it's interesting because like I've been watching basketball like pretty extensively now, and basketball people talk about retouches. You touch it once, you then pass it, then you get it back, you pass it, you get it back, you pass it. Next thing you know, the defending team is way out of position. That's something that in hockey we need to really incorporate that. It's not always a give. I'm not saying give and go, right? Because give and go always kind of insinuates I just give it to you and you give it to me right back. But
yeah,
sometimes it's you give, move, get it back after, maybe a second or two, right?
yeah,
And then you give it back again, you move, and then you get it back again. And so I'm talking a lot of like this weekend about retouches, the value of retouch, that the same player might touch the puck three or even more times in order to get the other team to get out of position. And essentially, that's your opportunity to score. And, those types of opportunities I find is interesting because statistically, and I have this in my presentation, statistically, you have an 81% increase in the probability that you're going to score on the second touch versus the first,
yeah.
right?
That's that.
So basically, that's like saying, okay, so let's say you gave me the pass and I'm going to shoot. And those are I think around 3%,
Yeah,
right? That first touch and the shot is going to go in the net, right? That the goalie is going to let it in because the goalie is going to be ready too, by the way, right?
yes,
That once you receive the pass, he's set for you. But then as soon as you do multiple touches, retouches, your probability of actually scoring goes high. I mean, even on that second touch, it's 81% increase. So, but people don't see it that way. They just go, "Oh, I see a net. I'm just going to shoot," right? And some coaches might get mad because they're making a pass, but it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe that's a retouch opportunity, right? So I don't know if you see anything like that in basketball as well.
well, it's actually you say that because Golden State, when they were champions, they were able to, they never worried about the shot clock because one of the things Steve Kerr would say was 5 touches, five people get to touch the ball before you got Steph Curry, the best player in the world, but five people need to touch that ball because, like you said, the movement is so important because, again, all you need is one person to have a lapse. And that's the time where you have the wide open shot or the wide open three. Whereas in hockey, it'd be the wide open shot when the goalie slides the wrong way because the puck has been gone the other way. And yeah, I think touches are so important. And in basketball, you have the 24 shot clock. And I always tell people from a professional standpoint, I don't think you need to take a shot with, I say, only leave about 6 to 7 seconds on the shot clock because I think the other 17 seconds should be movement, movement, movement. Because again, like you said, you're looking for the person who's going to have that lapse. And that lapse is going to be the door to get someone wide open and gets a great shot. And again, when you look at the teams again right now in the NBA here in the finals, I look at the four teams. The New York Knicks, they have a good team. They have a superstar in Brunson, but people are sleeping on Indiana. Why? Because Indiana they play 10 players. So like you said, when you talk about touches, people get in and they're moving the ball and who do you stop? Because one of the things I remember Phil Jackson saying, if you're going to stop someone, you better stop the best player and let the other four. I mean, fortunately for me, I had Shaq, I had Kobe, I had Michael Jordan. So no one's going to stop my guy. But at the end of the day, that's what you have to do is to be able to stop their best player. What you say, talking about multiple touches, it's so important. And it's very important in basketball. And I said, I look at this series, people might think I'm crazy and I'm going to go say it on the record. I think it's going to be Indianapolis versus OKC. And it's going to be team basketball. I think that's who's going to win the championship. So
Yeah, I totally agree because it's there's a lot of individual skills that need to be executed. I get that. You have to have the physicality. I get it. But I've seen so many players that have the physical aspect of it that still can't, you know, make it past whatever their level that they're at. And those are the ones that we definitely want to help because obviously they got to a certain point that served them to get to that point, but now they're saying, okay, well, how come I can't get to that next point, or that next level? And they're missing out on tremendous opportunities that they should be able to kind of be able to learn to see the play. And by the way, like, just playing more games, I find is, there's other ways that you can train the brain without having to play just games, 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 games. And I think to a certain point, you still have to work within a controlled environment, make your mistakes, learn from your mistakes, and it's not necessarily doing just one scenario, it's preparing yourself to be able to deal with every scenario that's going to happen inside a game. And that's what we try to do together, where we have, we're in a controlled environment here, and we're kind of breaking it down from not just from how they see, but how they make decisions here.
yeah, I think it's very important to break things down. And a lot of times, kids just want to play, 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 play. But what are they playing? If you're not seeing what's happening, you're not understanding the movement, you're not understanding the touches, you're just running up and down. It's chaos, is what it is, because the kids don't get to understand the value of learning the skill to apply the skill. You could be a great pick a puck handler, but you can't pass, well, you're not going to help your team. I'm glad you're good with the puck, but you can't pass the ball to the open guy. It's infuriating because again, at the end of the day, this mindset of just more games, more games, more games. I don't believe that is the. I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is that it's incorporating a little bit of everything, but more importantly, is to find what you do. You do what you want to do, what you don't do well, and you want that to become well. So work on your deficiencies.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's a lot of times people don't want to do that. They don't want to touch their deficiencies, And like what you do at your facility, it's all about you're challenging these young athletes, challenge them every single time they walk into your facility. And what they get every time they walk away is aha moment. I've gotten a little better and I'm understanding and it's processing. So now it's not like I don't get it. I do get it. How do I do it better when I walk back into that building, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And the one thing that a lot of people here are finally starting to understand is that it's like losing weight, right? Like in order to lose weight, you have to show up. And I've given a lot of clients a tough time because there's some clients that have, signed up for our membership program and I haven't seen them for 6 months. And they tell me they're busy, they're, doing this and doing that, whatever it is that they're doing, but yet they expect us to somehow work some voodoo magic that all of a sudden you come once every 6 months and all of a sudden you're like a hockey magician, and that's not how it works here. And yeah, I've given some clients some really tough love, and these are not kids; these are the parents, because ultimately the parents are responsible for bringing them here and doing what they need to do. And some people will say, "Oh, I drive, from Cambridge," and I'm like, "We have people that drive 4 hours to get here."
Yeah.
And the level of commitment that those guys have far outweighs some of the things that I've seen here. And most people live in the city and they say they're too busy. And I think there's a bit of a wake up call because they realize the kid's still not advancing. And that's something that if this program, if you're not committed to the program, just like losing weight, like you don't go to the gym once and all of a sudden you lose 30 pounds. And yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, Satoshi, because I'm honored to work with you in the in the basketball space, and I've had some clients said to me that they were committed and they were going to come, and again, like you, hard conversation. If you're not committed, don't waste my time, don't waste your time, because at the end of the day, you're not going to get better just talking about it. It's about doing it, and there's a lot of talkers. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, you want people who are committed and again, losing the weight, you have to put the work in. And just saying I'm putting the work in, but you're still eating a donut, you're not trying to work. So it's
Hmm.
it's a very delicate balance. And again, like I said, what you've been able to do, and I'm honored to be a part of it, is to let people understand how important the brain is. You know, because one of the things, and this sounds corny, but I was talking about this the other day to my wife, and I said, react forward. It's so perfect because how do you react to a situation, right? And how do you forge your goals? Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to put it in and go for it? Because if you forge a certain habit for excellence, then you get to excellence. And that's the
Hmm.
bottom line.
Yeah.
You can't make shortcuts don't do it. Shortcuts just
No.
don't do it. And a
No.
lot of people, they want shortcuts, right? Like you said, the magic pill. I'm going to be back in 3 months and my kid's going to, well, you know what? I just wanted to let you know there's 4 clients here, have been here 15 times since the last time you were here. And that kid is better than your kid. How? Well, again, it's what you put in.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I mean it's just really part of a routine. And I think parents need that routine as much as the kids do, and that they're not just an Uber, right? Driver to take them from place to place. Like they have to be committed to the process. I mean, rightly so. We qualify people and we have all of our consultation calls, and I always make sure like are you 100,000% in, because we're not just about training people. We want to build game changers, right?
Yeah.
Like that's different, right? It's not just a good player or a triple A player. We want game changers as part of our membership. So absolutely, absolutely. Let's talk about a little bit about film and how you go about analyzing film. What's your kind of process for it? And if, I'm wondering because if it's any different than what we do from a hockey perspective of breaking down plays and so on.
From a basketball perspective with film, it's pretty simple. It's kind of like the same way you guys do with hockey. You break it down frame by frame because at the end of the day, you have to be able to isolate the mistakes. And then you wind it back and you say, you tell me what you didn't see. Why did you not make that pass? Because we just put in a set of plays and how we're going to execute these plays. So here's the game and you weren't running any of the plays. So what do you want me to do? So what I always like to do is to go back with that film and show them for themselves. One of the things I and my players didn't like it. I used to always say to them, I said, go ahead, watch. And said, don't say a word. I let them watch the whole situation, and then I rewind it. And then I would literally stop every single time. I'd be like, here you're going around the corner. You didn't use the screen. You didn't pass the ball to the open person. You decided just to stand there. And, you know, hard love is good love if it's done with, I always tell people, you love hard and you coach hard. That's a really delicate thing to do. You love hard, but you coach hard. And a kid who understands that you really love them and you're really trying to help them, they're going to take a little bit more grit from you because they know at the end of the day, well, Satoshi has this film up and he's showing me my deficiencies. He's not doing it for his benefit, it's for my benefit. So as a player, when you start to understand that, the game really starts to give back to you because you start understanding someone's taking the time to film this to show where you had your breakdown mentally, where you didn't take your time to take a breath and say, this is where I was supposed to be. If I was in this corner, we would have had a shot at winning that game. And so, yeah, from a film perspective, I literally go frame to frame because I think it's very important to stop and explain to them what they did wrong, and I always do it in a kind of a comical way because I'll say things like, oh, here for me, I said, there's Andrew. Watch this, guys. Dribble, 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 dribble. You still haven't passed the ball yet. So your big man is wide open. So you have to, you go back and forth with them, but at the end of the day, you want them to understand that it's very important to learn from your mistakes. Because
Yeah.
it comes with the territory. As you're training and you're trying to get better, you want to minimize your mistakes. And the more you minimize your mistakes, the better player you become. Everyone makes mistakes. Coaches make mistakes, but it's how you learn from those mistakes. And when you feel that you're above making mistakes, is where you probably shouldn't be in the business because the best still make mistakes. And, the humility to say, I was wrong, or to point to a kid. And the other part of film, and I'm sure you do the same, you applaud them. Look at this. Look, this is what I'm talking about, guys. Watch. We talked about this, and this is what you did, and I'm so proud of you because look, you just ran the play. You did exactly what we asked to do, what we worked on the ice, and this is what I'm talking about. And that gives players and athletes an opportunity to start the aha moment, right? Because as they take checks and balances for themselves, they start saying to themselves, shit, this is what coach talking about. I got it. So yeah, I need to get off that puck and pass it to my teammate because this is what he was showing me. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's how we do with basketball.
Yeah, I think that that's exactly what we would do in hockey as well. And, granted, not every coach might take that same approach of making it enjoyable and fun for them, but it's something that every coach should really start to adopt, I think, because, kids to some extent, like you have to build trust with them and uh actually give me 1 second.
No worries.
It's my 1 o'clock meeting. Haley Skimura. Sorry,
No,
I'm
no,
gonna
no
edit.
worries.
Yeah, they're coming in here. Yeah, so what was I saying? I don't remember now. I'm gonna edit this later, so don't worry. But I do have another question. How important is memory in basketball?
Memory is everything because I will say this and I'll say this to the universe. To be a great player is to understand plays. To understand plays, you have to be able to have the cognitive development to understand what's going on in your mind because you have to be able to visualize and understand what you're learning. So I have probably 300 plays that I have in my head, and my players had to learn those plays. And I wish I had had that card to show you, but I would tell my kid, you have to know that you need to learn and be aware. Because if you're not aware of every scenario, you're not aware of no scenario. You know, the cognitive part of basketball is key. And I say this for current basketball. We'll look at this. There's a kid who plays for OKC. His name is Alex Caruso. He played for the Lakers. The Lakers let him walk. He went to Chicago, was in Chicago, great guy. Chicago traded him just for, they wanted a different flavor. He goes to OKC and he's the glue for that team. And he says it all the time. He says, I've been grinding from day one. I learned the Lakers playbook. I learned the Bulls playbook. And now I know OKC's playbook. And you have to be open and willing to learn. And again, from a cognitive perspective, your mind is everything, and just a segue with my situation, I had a stroke, and I tell people it was a major stroke, two golf balls inside of my brain. I should have been gone. So the work that I had to put in at Sunnybrook and Toronto Rehab to learn to be able to speak, the fact that I'm having a conversation with you and I don't have any deficits, it's all about that brain. And what you put in your brain, food as well, it's for everything.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Yeah, because I remember you mentioning that to me as well about the stroke, and it's incredible how much you've recovered from it. So definitely commend you on that.
Well, listen, I appreciate you and I appreciate looking forward to working with you. And again, like I said, I'm excited with our future. And I think that, you have this platform, Satoshi, and I'm going to shout out to Satoshi. A lot of people aren't serious. You're very serious, and your clients are serious, and your people who come on your podcast are serious. And I think that's a great place and a space to be in because there's a lot of people who don't really love what they do, and you love what you do. I commend you for that.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and that's the type of network that we're going to continue to build in the next, few years, making sure that we give our clients the best of the best of the best, and that might be getting some mental coaching from a person like yourself, who's seen it from a different sports and who's worked with high performance athletes as well. So that's definitely a direction that we're going towards. But yeah, no, Drew, like I really appreciate you coming on today because. I think there's definitely a lot of parallels with hockey and basketball, and that's exactly why, we have our basketball training facility here. And Drew, you've joined us as a director of basketball performance, and we're so glad to have you here. But I want to thank everybody for joining the podcast today. Make sure you share this and let people know that hey, we're not just about hockey here at React Forge. It's multi-sport. We have motorsport racers, we have basketball, we have baseball, we have soccer, we have Olympic fencers, and the list goes on and on. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the brain. It's a single or most important organ that we all have that controls our body and mechanics and movements. Drew, thanks a lot for coming on today. I appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.
All right, you too. So that concludes the episode for today. And I hope you guys get a chance to join us and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we will talk to you very, very soon. Thanks a lot.